Hello, and welcome to the Wolf Den podcast. I'm your host Naco, joined with Zenitsu here to discuss BT7. Um, we had started our discussion last time with, um, last time we discussed BT7 at least, the hybrids and the hybrid decks we expected to see in the meta and how we expected them to do. This time, we're going to try and focus more on the decks that aren't necessarily exclusively hybrid based and how those decks adapt to a hybrid environment. So, why don't you go ahead and just pick a deck, Zenitsu, that you want to talk about first that we didn't discuss last time? I feel like it'd be easier to just do that.
Yeah, so obviously the big one is going to be Jesmon, because, Jesmon does get a couple of meaningful updates in BT7 in the form of the Sistermon Awakens and a new Huckmon. So the introduction of these cards make the deck a little bit more, I guess, consistent, because the new Huckmon is looking for your Sistermons, which you're running in a slightly higher quantity than before, because you actually want to use your Awakened Sistermons. I think Awaken CL is pretty mediocre, but Awaken Blanc, that's where it's at. Like, Blanc's really, really good. The recovery basically makes it like your pseudo LordKnightmon, even more than you were before. And the fact that you can now recycle your Jesmon base cards because of the Awaken Blocks on delete ability just adds, again, to the overall consistency. And another Huckmon just means it's another Huckmon to be searched off of your BT6 Huckmon. But outside of that, Jesmon's just doing its same classic thing, where it's just trying to line up the perfect stack to kill the opponent and gain lots of value off of all of your Sistermons.
So, that's a pretty good synopsis of like changes to Jesmon. Um, I guess my initial thoughts are, does it does it really get like power crept? Do these changes make up for the fact that the meta has, changed completely around them?
That's a little bit harder to say because Jesmon in Japan had to fight through Ice Wall in BT7, and we don't. So I think Jesmon is still going to be a relevant deck. I just think the fact that he actually might be more relevant just because security is getting weaker as a whole because of tamers. Although that's a whole different issue. Because like now that we're running less options and less like option based removal, we're running more tamers and Digimon based removal, where your Digimon is going to be doing a lot more work. Um, and I think Jesmon still kind of survives in that environment. It's just he might not have the speed, even with the consistency boosts that he got, to be able to compete with what the hybrid based decks are doing, because, well, all they do is just sit on tamers and then just go up into their Digimon out of nowhere and make a very powerful turn happen.
But Jesmon didn't really care about that to begin with. Like the piercing was nice if there was a target. The uh justice I think is the I don't remember the name of the option card.
Yeah, just Blade of the
Just
Justice
Judgment of the Blade. I'm sorry, not
or
justice.
Judgment of the
Judgment.
Blade.
Yeah, Judgment of the Blade was nice, but like so in general, like I just feel as though um if Jesmon just gets faster, or not necessarily faster, but more consistent, because at Jesmon's fastest, as we've established, it's already pretty fast. Like it's true OTK, but um, I think it has more to do with like the security as you've mentioned. Like so I I kind of want to like I guess back up a little bit from my previous stance on like security's like a joke because having played more with BT7, having gotten, uh physical cards last week, um I've found that while the security is easier to like physically chip away, you're not dying to security as often. That doesn't mean you're not losing to security in the greater sense. Like
Right,
it's
because
yeah.
giving the opponent a tamer to then now just say, "Oh, my hybrids are even easier to play now. Thank you." Just puts you one step closer to losing because you basically gave them the resource that they needed. And that was like why Gabuban was doing as well as it did, because it was like super threatening to attack into it because, well, not only Ice Wall was a factor and Hammer Spark, but if you hit the map that they needed, then they just go off and
Yeah, you
then
give
you
them the
just can
bond
die.
the following turn. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
which is why we saw a lot of people adopt their playstyle to basically not attack their security and wait for them to deal damage to themselves and then figure out a way to kill them on crackback.
yeah, because in the myriad of hybrid decks I've played and played against now, doing like like at least tripling, I guess, my um specific play testing as far as like decks I've been exposed to. Um, the amount of times where either I or my opponent has just legitimately won off of Tamer's insecurity is ridiculous. Like, um, some internal playtesting, Zenitsu, I guess you came in at the tail end of it, but um, I had an awful hand as green hybrids, but I didn't want to mull because I needed those pieces. I just needed a tamer for those pieces. I just had all the hybrids and no tamers, and then opponent flips two. I get a Mimi and a JP. I literally won the game the next turn. Like it was crazy. That he gave me
Yeah,
enough
because
memory, and then um, the two tamers to build off of.
yeah, and I in my internal playtesting at locals, thankfully I have a really good player. Shout outs to Eli Hill at Limitless or not Limitless, Limit
Oof.
Break Games. Yeah, he's in my locals.
No, I meant
He was
messing up his
playing
name.
yellow. Oh,
You're good. Keep going.
anyway, Eli, great player. And where was and he was playing yellow security control with the purple egg and well, it wasn't security control, it was yellow hybrids. And I was playing jank Eosmon, and we had some really good back and forth. And the fact that like my Eosmon can deal lots of damage and live was definitely a huge factor on the overall um lack of removal coming out of security. So it allows other decks to exist, but like the other decks that have to exist basically have to deal lots of damage, otherwise they just will not be able to compete. And this is still kind of true for all of the decks going up against any hybrid deck, where it's just like you really want to deal as much damage as you possibly can to end the game as fast as you can with that one turn. So you almost have to play like OTK if you're playing a normal deck. Otherwise, your normal traditional egg to six deck is just going to struggle very hard.
So, I guess in regards to Jesmon now, because Jesmon's goal is to win in one turn. Now, these consistency tools help with that. Um, I guess specifically being if you have the BT7 Huckmon, you can trigger that first to pull a Sistermon you wouldn't have had to then play with Jesmons when attacking, because you get to choose the order. But outside of that, I don't know how often that's coming up as far as like, game deciding uh inheritables as it, like in so situations where you win in BT7 where you wouldn't have in BT6. Um I think the Sistermons are a huge like basically the biggest improvement though. Just the ability to
Yeah,
evo off of them and them having like their new varied effects. Obviously the CL is worse, but and I don't think you run the um Awaken CL at all. But you
no,
can,
you don't run Awakened
if
CL. That
anything, you
card
could
is
just
just so
cut regular
mediocre.
CL for Awaken Blancs, and then just run maybe like the same amount of Sistermon as you did before, maybe a couple more, like a couple, like two
No,
more.
you still run CL. So, because CL, the DP boost is still relevant, especially against yellow hybrids, because like if you check
Mm-hmm.
one Digimon against yellow hybrids, they could have their security boosted by 6 to like 8 or 9k. And literally your Jesmon actually is in fear of dying now, especially if you don't have that extra DP.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that because that is something that I didn't expect to be a strength of the deck, even though it is like, kind of like one of the core mechanics of the yellow hybrid deck. But like looking at the pieces and looking what they were doing, I didn't necessarily think that like being afraid of like, so yeah, like just two Zoe inheritables and a single Zephyrmon. I know the names are different.
Yeah, it's Zephyrmon.
Zephyrmon, like when digivolving, giving you that's 9,000. That's 9 plus 9k. So you at that point are dying to everything that is a Digimon in their deck because they don't run rookies.
Or
Because
they, depending on the build, they wouldn't run a whole lot of rookies.
yeah, I mean most type or I guess yeah, no on-colored rookies to be specific. So they aren't running yellow rookies traditionally, but um because like
But that's
Zephyrmon's 6k, Kazemon's 5k. So I guess Jesmon's traditional um 14 without a sister or without a CL or um 16 with. So the 16 being kind of a big deal because plus 9 isn't that like it seems like like a edge case scenario like that would like never really happen or rarely happen, but like it's not that hard to do. That is exactly like two Zoe inheritables and one Zephyrmon, or um I mean if they have like one like starter deck TK and then one Zoe that came off that with a Zephyrmon, like that's what 8k. Like these are reasonable like numbers to hit on a fairly consistent basis.
Oh, 100%. Like the idea behind yellow hybrids is literally get up into, well, the way Eli was playing his, not like to reveal his secrets or anything, and it's not necessarily like the most uncommon thing in the world. He was just playing like raw recovery. Like, let me stall you out with recovery. So he
Mhm.
was originally playing Shine, and he just realized Shine is too reactive and not proactive. So he was literally just sitting and chilling on a Dynasmon. And the Dynasmon would keep healing his security. And
Mhm.
if he would get two out with a hybrid stack underneath, there's two Zoes underneath there already. And because he's not swinging with his level sixes, they're not dying very often.
Mhm. Yeah. Lack of options also means lack of hard removal.
Right, because like I mean, granted, I was playing Eosmon, and Eosmon has a borderline of zero removal, except for the main level six Eosmon from BT6. But like, I digress. And if you're not running removal to remove large bodies, those cards could just sit on the field and rack up and accrue lots of additional value. And then he just goes, "Okay, I have enough memory. Let me just Susanomon," and then start punching you really hard and really
Mhm.
fast. And then just be like, hybrid, hybrid, done. Game over.
Yeah. Yeah, like the um I think I said it last time too, but like the idea that like the highlight you posted from your like Gabuban versus Sekon like triple hybrid lethal is like every deck can do that now given enough memory and given the setup. Like especially the hybrid based decks, how they um like so like it's just like the same time. I guess the same tune, just in a different way. Like we've seen decks do a lot with a little bit of memory, and the decks are just doing more. Now they're just actually winning the game instead of like pseudo winning the game in the form of like Lilith Loop, where they weren't necessarily killing you on like the turn they looped. Um, but they could get really close and then just absolutely prevent you from like dealing with their board state and then beating you on the following turn. And now hybrids can just kind of skip that step given enough setup or given a circumstance, not even enough setup, because they can do the setup or you can do the setup by hitting them.
Right. And the fact that literally a lot of the hybrid packages literally can go, okay, Pokemon on the field, free Evo into level 4,
Hmm.
then Evo for 1, level 5, and then that just gives you literally free range on whatever powerhouse level 6 you want to run to kind of just help sweep and clean up the game. And Eli used Dynasmon and Seraphimon. Seraphimon actually was pretty insane just because, again, security is weaker as a whole in terms of threats that would actually kill him. So the fact that he consistently was able to have enough security for him to have security tech plus allowed him to apply lots of early game pressure for literally doing almost nothing.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
yellow
then Dynasmon
hybrids.
just
It's like
Yeah,
it's its own
and
beast.
yeah, and then Dynasmon just sat on the field to passively recover, putting more threats and more possible tamers into the security to be checked for even more benefit, on top of the fact that he could also mill the tamers to set up Susanomon as well. So, like, it was just a very, very high functioning synergistic deck that just stalled out the game. And granted, I would have an Eosmon that could punch for 3 security with piercing at like 17k, and I still managed to lose because I just couldn't deal with what he was doing.
Hmm. We're talking about Jesmon still, right?
I mean,
I know. It's fine.
Jesmon's put in the same type of scenario because like Eosmon is also, you could call it a six, you could call it a egg to six deck, in a sense. I was playing a hybrid variant of it because I like the idea of giving it piercing, but just it goes to show, if your deck doesn't have the ability to deal lots of damage, like, you're gonna have a very hard time with
Hmm.
this format.
So, I've had mixed results, honestly, with it now, but uh, like the same idea, like, so how do decks solve the hybrid meta, right? How do they operate in a world where, swinging at security doesn't necessarily kill your Digimon, but it does, advance your opponent's board state, advances your opponent's win condition. Um, and in the case of yellow hybrids, um, I like consistently starting them with, 6 to 8 memory, given their like full suite of tamers. But um, I guess another, like, I don't even really want to move on from Jesmon yet, because like I feel like we haven't really mentioned, like, we mentioned that it struggles and then like ignored the actual how does it function. Like, because Jesmon was a great deck in BT7 in Japan. I know we're not living in the same world, but the fact that like Jesmon managed to dodge Ice Wall gave it an edge that other decks didn't. And now we have Jesmon, we have all the pieces. Like where does it go? Like I guess, does it still compete? Does it still keep up?
Um, yes and no. Like, it is one of the better, in a sense, OTK style of decks, and like I was harping back to, you really do just need to have the ability to deal lots of damage to compete. Like, if you could put the opponent in such a disadvantage in terms of their health total, like, Jesmon can easily just create a wide board out of nowhere, has lots of really strong abilities to help it stay alive, and it does just have a lot of tech and utility to it that just allows it to survive. I actually think Sistermon Blanc Awakened, just the recovery helps it keep itself alive even more, just because it's recovery. Like, it's a blanket recovery that Jesmon gets only.
I
And that makes it harder for the opponent to kill Jesmon as a result.
Yeah, I'd say that just the idea that these Sistermon, like, they're so versatile. Um like I'm reading through abilities here and trying to figure out, like, how does this help me, or does this help me, or does this hurt me? And like, um so Blanc is already the blocker, right? So you can use Blanc on a previous turn, block with it, and then use Jesmon to play Awaken Blanc, tucking the Blanc you just used to recover one. Basically, like, saving you, like, or a net gain of 2 security, as a result of that trade. Because if in a world where Awaken Blanc doesn't exist, you just block with her, and then you could play her, like, again from trash, drawing another card, but um you don't like the +1, I guess, and then the on deletion of returning you a card from your trash to your hand is very relevant in a deck that likes to run and will probably run a decent amount of analog youth.
Right, because like Jesmon's problem before in like Classic and BT6 was, once it ran out of steam, the game was basically done. You just really were having a hard time struggling to rebuild because of the deck's own inconsistencies. And the Awakened Blanc just really helps solve some of that problem where it's just like, okay, it died. Sure, let me grab back the savior that I need to be able to rebuild into another perfect Jesmon stack. Like it does help with the overall consistency on how you could actually play that deck. And that's like the magic of Jesmon, where it's just like it just does so many different things that it could just be sometimes really hard to deal with, making it one of the best egg to six decks and OTK style of decks as of right now. Because obviously, come BT8, Savior's going to get hit and Jesmon's going to take a dip in popularity, but it's still going to be a deck. Don't get me wrong.
Mm.
But that's less because of Jesmon and more because of Chimeramon.
So yeah, I don't know. I guess my thoughts on it would just be that like if you're someone who likes Jesmon, then and you've been playing Jesmon this whole time, definitely play with it. Definitely stick with it. You don't need to abandon it just because it had poor performances in EX1 like nationals or EX1 tournaments. Um, and Jesmon had fewer results in North America as a whole than it did in Japan. I just the only thing I could put that on is just the idea that Jesmon, without finding delicate plan, does struggle with more control-based decks and um, struggles in best of threes as opposed to best of ones. But Jesmon's definitely still a good deck, and if you want to play it, continue playing with it, work with it, and if anything, like just the lower popularity of it, without it losing any steam, like it is still at like full power of BT7 still. I think will catch more people by surprise. They won't necessarily be as prepared for Jesmon in matchups, and won't necessarily know how to play around you as well.
Right, because I think the two Boogeyman decks of the format is going to be red hybrids and yellow hybrids. Red
Mm-hmm.
hybrids solely for the fact that it just is one of the best red decks ever made. Hides it does the whole hybrid thing. It just hides everything when it needs to, and then it just kills you basically in one go in various different ways, making it super scary. And then obviously yellow hybrids is the complete opposite end of that spectrum, where it is going to be the premier control deck and it's just going to stall and wall you out and make you feel so sad that you even bother to sit across the table from it.
Yeah, yellow hybrids is almost like the deck equivalent of like uh losing via like attrition. They just you can keep punching and they'll keep recovering, and eventually one of you will get tired. You know, like they do have ways to win the game, obviously with Sanamon, um, but just the idea that they mostly just kind of like uh discourage their opponents. Like they win by making you depressed about the game.
Right, because like they will just like literally one mistake against yellow hybrids and things can start spiraling out of control very quickly just because of all of the memory gain possibilities that they give and have. So like literally just them being at lower security than you with a couple of TKs and Karis already set up, just it's so brutal because now they're outplaying you because they have more memory to work with and now they could actually use their cards to even greater efficiency.
So the other um not OTK I guess, but the other chicken deck of the format makes a return. Everyone's favorite, LordKnightmon. Um, I have made a LordKnightmon list. Similar to you put one up, right?
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
Lord Knight Kazuchi, and I didn't realize how disgusting Boutmon can be when he's online.
Yeah. Um, I will say, I was running that package in my earlier playtesting, and the amount of times I like tried to make that Evo stack happen for the effect of like the equivalent of the Mechanorimon LordKnightmon. Um, opponent declares attack, unsuspend, block. Opponent declares attack, unsuspend, block. Like the Mechanorimon, basically on a LordKnightmon body. Um, I feel like it was just inefficient. Not necessarily like inefficient like in a specific situation where yes, I have a LordKnightmon that can perma block is disgusting. But the amount of times where I had to go out of my way to make that happen, I guess, because Boutmon costing or Bulkmon costing 2, um, and Boutmon only having a ESS that triggers when your opponent does something just makes it too reactive for what is supposedly like an aggro deck, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the beauty of LordKnightmon and why I initially set Boutmon to 2, is because, like, you still want to swing with LordKnightmon, and then just have Boutmon as the inheritable, just basically de-incentivize the opponent from actually thinking about trying to attack, while you're basically playing this black deck where you're just slowly trying to chip a crest and a grew, lots of value based on you just literally playing your Digimon for free. And then you could get into other level 6s like Kazuchimon to do various other really silly things, just because like the dumbest part of LordKnightmon is being able to play a level 5 for free. So like it's still a very interesting style of deck. It's just the getting to the Boutmon dream is probably the hardest dream to make.
Yeah. Um, Especially because like um like order of operations, Boutmon doesn't save LordKnightmon from dying because you can swing at the suspended LordKnightmon and it being unsuspended doesn't prevent the attack from connecting. So you need both the Boutmon and the Bulkmon for Boutmon to matter. Boutmon as a whole doesn't matter, unfortunately. Like, because their first attack will just then target LordKnightmon if that's something they want to do. Um, Secondly, um, like the hard requirement of 3 or more security, while Kazuchi does help in that regard, um, you run fewer Kazuchi. You have no way of searching Kazuchi, whereas a lot of these other decks are basically pilfering through their whole deck, looking for their specific pieces. And my like first couple best of series were almost like I say throwaway only because um in my attempt to set up Boutmon Bulkmon or Bulkmon Boutmon, 4-5, um my opponent just digivolved into Promo Aguni, raised a Promo Aguni, swung with an Ancient Greymon, and knocked me to 2 security. Okay, I no longer have this. Boutmon Bulkmon is already offline on turn 2.
Well, that in those fringe scenarios, you would have to have some recovery level 3s. So like you almost are required to almost in that scenario have Lucimon to be like, okay,
hmm
Digivolve Lord Knight, swing, play Lucy, put me to 3. Now I'm at 3 for bulk
Yeah.
bout combo.
Yeah, I didn't run any, and neither do you. So,
No, because again, like I probably in my thought process, I saw that it was too fringe to try to make a hard strategy around, and I just wanted to make a well-rounded Lord Knight deck. So like
yeah.
if you get it, cool. If you don't, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, no, it's so I guess I still like the idea of like a LordKnightmon um hide and raising, come out when you need to. Your inheritables can matter more so than they previously did. You previously basically just had Angelwomon or bust. Um,
Well, that's because there was literally no
yeah,
low-level inheritables worth running.
yeah. And now yellow has, inheritables worth running. Um, I will say I did win a game with a very disgusting turn of plays where I blinding raid from 4 to 3 security, swung with BT7 Pulsemon underneath a LordKnightmon, gaining me a further 2 memory. Um, and those kinds of plays are like the edge case scenarios that like the deck really shines in. But um, I don't know. I think LordKnightmon is almost just better played, unfortunately, as just a 6 or I guess 7 to 8 card package in yellow hybrid.
Well, I mean, that's just what a lot of decks eventually are going to turn into is just run hybrids and then whatever top end you feel like you want to run. Just because the hybrids just accelerate your game
Mm-hmm.
plan. The tamers are basically uninteractable level 3s, so they're almost like extra raising areas that actually can do stuff. So like that's just the nature of what hybrid meta is uh,
Mm-hmm.
forming for us, is just that interact in uninteractivity that we basically are trying to we're trying to combo out, and it just determines how well your combo is on how well your deck is going to do, which is why Jesmon, harping back to Jesmon for a second, is one of the better decks, because he's basically just LordKnightmon but better.
Mm-hmm. Um,
But LordKnightmon does have more consistency because yellow as a whole has more consistency. But I digress.
yeah.
And LordKnightmon can still do some very powerful and silly things. Just because a free level 5 into another level 6 is like disgusting.
Yeah, that combo, I guess, is the one thing that stands the test of time, the one like the thing that like in a world where people are digivolving over their hybrid for 2 or digivolving over a tamer for 2, it usually like not, I guess not usually, but it um could have been a memory tamer, which just gives them the memory to then digivolve anyway. Digivolve for 2, digivolve for 1 into level 5, do something depending upon which like gross variant of level 5 hybrid you're running. Um, Swinging with a level 6 and creating a level 5 for free that does something is still relevant. Though I will say also, from my experience in playtesting, you frequently have no targets for Knightmon that matter because like all of the hybrids are above 4K and they don't run
Well, I mean,
anything fewer than 4K.
if you could pick off like a rookie, that's probably your best case scenario. But yeah,
They're not
just
really running
removal
any
as a whole.
rookies.
I know, like the removal as a whole just got a lot worse because now there's less reasons for Digimon to actually exist on the field until you're ready to combo out because of just the nature of tamers.
Yeah. And like the entire idea of like LordKnightmon chipping and controlling the board doesn't work against a hybrid deck because you chip them, you gave them a tamer that they then, either they're drawing with, they're evoing off of. Like it's either like the enabler tamer is I guess the inheritable tamer as I've referred to them, like because they don't do anything other than be it like an enabler tamer, or it could be a memory gaining tamer, could be dual tamer, just strict memory tamer if they don't have one already. But just giving them the extra raising zone, so to speak, the extra bodies to evo off of, to chain off of, is something that you can't necessarily afford to do with LordKnightmon. You're hiding and raising, making your opponent do something. You come out of raising and give them a tamer, and now you've what? Like you haven't necessarily advanced your board state, and you have advanced your opponents.
Well, the only other problem with LordKnightmon that, like, again, Jesmon fixes is the fact that LordKnightmon's damage output is really low. Like, the best way to make LordKnightmon deal extra damage is with Bushi Agumon for that free rush to get an extra swing with.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're only doing 1 damage a turn with LordKnightmon as a whole, and you have to use extra cards, which is adding extra steps to allow LordKnightmon to do more damage. So like the most LordKnightmon can do ordinarily is like maybe 2 damage a turn with, again, those extra steps. So Electric Rush allows you to unsuspend, get another swing. Maybe that'll allow you to play another Bushi. Who knows? But like that's just
Mm-hmm.
adding those steps is slowing the deck down as a whole versus Jesmon where he just naturally does it. It's just like let me swing, unsuspend, 2 checks, play Sistermon, do something with Sistermon, swing again, 2 more checks, Sistermon comes out again, something else happens.
Yeah.
Like it's just very immediate, and LordKnightmon, you have to play more of a waiting game for that to happen.
Mm-hmm. Um. Yeah. LordKnightmon definitely will see play, but it will still be like I guess probably about as much play as it saw last format, if that's just to say anything. Like,
Yeah, I think Kazuchimon is probably the best support card outside of just adopting it into yellow hybrids, just because Kazuchimon is adding that punch
hmm
that LordKnightmon didn't have before.
yeah, assuming that you're winning. because again, Kazuchimon just recovers and passes turn if you're losing, which you're
Well,
usually
I mean,
losing
you
in
could be
LordKnightmon.
like, I mean, you could line up a play where it's just like, okay, I have like one or two or even zero security, and it'd be like TK go to 3, blinding ray, and then
Hmm.
that puts me at 5 for Kazuchi. So there's that.
Yeah,
Like there's easy ways for yellow to get to 5 to make Kazuchi good.
I guess the other thing, like, about this meta is the amount of times where I've been at 0 security and not lost are few. If I'm going to 1, I'm going to 0 and they're swinging with a hybrid. A Goonie for game, a Lobo for game, you know, Grumblemon for game. Like, so, um, like people can just do that math like a little bit easier now. Um, so
Which is why it leads into the favor of holding off your attacks, pacing yourself, and just making one big swing to try to kill them in one go.
mhm.
Like that's kind of just what we're going to have to learn to do. And again, we still have to respect other players' Digimons because there's still the same levels of removal as there has been since LordKnightmon came out, even since Yellow War Greymon came out. There's still just very powerful removal type of abilities to punish you for raising too early. Um, and that can also lead to your easy defeat because you could just get blown out very quickly.
Mm. So the third, I guess, like there's a running theme here, I guess. Like if people paying attention, like the idea of like how do you compete in a world without hybrids or in a world full of hybrids as a non-hybrid deck? The decks we're talking about kind of all have the same answer. X Antibody, Black X Antibody, the other like the new hyped non-hybrid deck of the format. Um, I've been like the Black X Antibody deck has attracted me to Black a while ago, so I've been playing it since BT5 now. Tail end of BT5. Um, I've had like mediocre success, I'd say, with variations of it. The best being just a I will never lose to security control black blocker deck that loses to Gabubond and Jesmon. Um, but the X Antibody deck, I was originally fairly disappointed with in like testing as far back, I guess, as like actual BT6 or what should have been EX1 for the rest of the world and was Black BT6 for North America. But the uh, Zubagan variant, I guess, the OTK variant of X Antibody, I think is something that I'll be running, and I think is a lot more dangerous than people would initially believe.
Well, Zubagon Punch is already a like really good card that didn't see a lot of play just because we moved away from OTKs, just because of how easy it was for like other decks to blow you out. And how I guess slower the format was just because we didn't really need those types of cards. And now that we do, it kind of brings some spotlight back into what we need in order to combat these hybrid based decks as a non hybrid based deck. And Zubagon Punch making your stuff bigger, blocker, reboot, and deal more damage is like the golden package that you could ever hope for.
So I would disagree on like the like we didn't need or didn't have like a need for OTK decks or like the didn't have room for OTK decks like in prior formats. I think the problem was that it was the ease of access. We just physically like the hard requirement of being 13k before you've swung with memory to spare is hard. A lot harder in prior formats and only with the advent of like cards such as Dorugamon, um, Doragoromon, I'm sorry, like does it even become feasible? Like, and the addition of I guess more readily available security attacks.
The other problem was the popularity and security control was actively making that type of strategy bad just because you put so much effort into your one stack just
Mm.
to swing and have it die on the first check to like Gaia Force or
Yep.
something. I mean, granted, they
Yeah.
weren't playing Gaia Force, they were using more on Iron Fisted Onslaught,
Mm.
but still,
BT5
like
they were. So,
I mean, yeah, but still, like, just big, large body removal in security was just a huge deterrent for you trying to play that, and it was better to taper your attacks, and play a little bit slower but safer.
hmm
And now with security being weaker and security control not necessarily on its way out, but not at the forefront of the meta anymore, just because hybrids beat it out so hard, it's almost comedic. Um, that like you could actually reasonably think about putting those types of cards back in because they can OTK and you're not afraid of your Digimon dying anymore.
so while like Gaia Force, Onslaught, um, and there are a number of cards because like in a one stack deck, a lot of cards that aren't necessarily kill cards become kill cards. Like Happy Bullet becomes a a kill card. Um, in a one stack deck. Um, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Just in any deck that restands Trump Sword, but um, I think so I guess while those still exist and that's still a problem, um, like your traditional if uh hybrid control being the control deck of the format, their only real hard removal being like the large security Digimon that we mentioned previously, or Wyvern's Breath. The Black X Antibody deck has a very narrow margin of safety, but a narrow enough margin to where they evade both. Because especially with Zubagon, you're swinging 18, 19, so I guess 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yeah, 19. Like with a full lineup, you don't necessarily need the full lineup, so 18, 17 are also doable, but you just kind of evade that. Like we mentioned how like they could do the plus 9 fairly consistently, and plus 9 on a level 4 gives them like a 15, 16k body, and you could just narrowly avoid like I guess the risk of dying to that security. And Wyvern's Breath, you're tall enough to where you survive with 3k left, and if you just hit Tamers for the rest of security, it doesn't matter.
Right, because a lot of yellow hybrid lists also are going to adopt a little bit of purple for Schwartz Lizard,
Yep.
and that card doesn't even touch level sixes. It's like, oh, you have a level six? Cool, this does nothing.
Mhm.
So, like, it doubles down on you wanting to use that large stack to be able to have a very powerful push turn.
And um, as other decks, it in a very uniquely fashion, and like one of my favorite cards actually probably printed thus far, like art wise, like aesthetic wise, like Doru Greymon, the level 5 of the X Antibodies. Um, its ability, just how versatile it is, like how it benefits your game plan, the inheritable giving you security attack +1, and in a deck that can stack multiple of those. I mentioned, like, talking with you beforehand about how how it's basically the idea that like, what if Jesmon could have two Savior? Like, while it's not restanding like Savior does, but like it's the level 5 you want, and I can get two of them if I want to, if I have two of, you know?
Yeah, like your premier level 5 is usually going to support your level 6 to be like absolutely stupid. And the fact that you could, like you said, have more instances of your premier level 5 just helps you be a better stack to be able to do more powerful things.
And the ability to hide in raising, and I guess like it's all kind of coming together, and like where LordKnightmon lacks, Jesmon and X Antibody make up for the ability to compete on the searching level. It is really it's a race to the bottom of your deck essentially, but not trashing it. You're just sifting through it. Um, with like my deck's currently running 4 Tamers and 4 of the level 3 Searcher, so I'm just genuinely I'm ripping through my deck looking for X antibodies, pulling out Tamers, X antibodies, and just tucking the rest. That's all I need. like the rest is there for filler mostly, and
On top of any other card draw you could be running.
yeah, um, the fact that the all of the inheritables have the like not errata, but like ruling text that they activate when tucked because they now are a part of the Digimon in question. So you have the freedom to say, I have a Doru Greymon. I so I guess I raise level 4. I can then digivolve to level 5, tucking something. It's either whatever you have extra of or whatever you need most, sometimes preferably both. So if you have extra Doru Greymon, tucking Doru Greymon, giving you the safety and security attack +1 on the following turn, um, or the benefit of just using that safety the turn it comes out, to then like inherit that safety when you digivolve into level 6 and actually swing for the turn. There's just so many different plays that can be made with this deck.
Yeah, and I feel like protection is something that is going to be seen more prominent, where it's like it's not necessarily reducing the amount of interactions you have with your opponent, but like they seem to want to allow you to be able to play your cards and actually be able to play your cards. So like we've seen protection before in multiple different cards before. Granted, most of them are black, some of them are green, but regardless, protection is protection. It's better to have something than nothing at times. Um, and they just want you to be able to use your cards to the fullest, and that protection ability is very, very valuable, especially now, just because removal still hasn't gone away. It's just changed, and being able to have your Digimon be safe sitting on the field is probably the best feeling knowing the opponent won't be able to touch it.
Yeah, so while because this deck doesn't restand, and doesn't have access to Blitz Omni, um, though there are some outs like it's Black X Antibody isn't necessarily the true OTK. It's more not necessarily in practice, but in like end result of a Lilith Loop type situation where I have put you in a incredibly precarious position. I will win on the following turn, and you can do minimal to stop me because um if you've gotten like a true double Doru Greymon, um, Zubagon punch turn, like I mean honestly, like the God stack, which I don't even necessarily think I've gotten in playtesting yet, of the Sec +1 from Sunarisamon, then the double Sec +1 from Doru Greymon. So it's what, one, two, three, four,
And then one more
five.
from
Yeah, so
Zubagon.
that's a full stack, a full 5 stack in one swing. Um, Rebooting, existing on the following turn as a blocker at, well, so yeah, 11, what, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 78. So 19. You're a 19k blocker. Um, and you usually have a tamer out for the purposes of a Lobo lethal, if necessary, Grumble lethal, but hybrid lethal. Um,
Right.
it really just it over the like it builds its stack, it blows you out, and then it wins on the next turn.
Yep, and it's kind of taking a note from what Red does because Red does that same exact type of thing. It'll blow you out, set itself up to try to have lethal the following turn if it can't do it already. Granted, Red has some of its own benefits in the form of like Blitz Omni and even more hybrids to work with. But still, the fact that other decks are able to do something very similar is just a testament to that type of strategy being really good right now in this format. And going to like the whole Lilith loop, putting themselves in a precarious situation, um, Lilith loop is still going to be good.
Yeah,
Spoiler: Jesmon is stupid good, and while it's unrestricted, there's zero reason not to play 4 copies of Jesmon, 4 copies of Scatter Mode. It's just that good.
yeah.
Like
Um,
it'll help set Lilith Loop up easily, and Lilith Loop, even though yes, it did lose Mega Digimon Fusion, has win rate 60%, which is close enough in Lilith Loop's case, and it
mhm,
actually allows you to run better tamers, so you're not hard locked to running just
the white
the level
tamers.
4 white tamer.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah. You can just actually run like purple memory tamers that fetch you cards that you've trashed or that you may need to reuse after you've used them or trashed them. Um, yeah, it's the OTK decks are still like I also don't necessarily think any of these decks will be uh I would say like tier 1 in usage, like in like tournament placings. I just don't think enough people will play them for them to see the results they potentially warrant because while they are in some ways new-ish hotness of, newer Jesmon, like a usable black deck, um, and, you know, everyone wanting to play Lilith Loop. I guess Lilith Loop being the exception. Like, so the OTK decks, I guess, is what I'm talking about. I don't necessarily see these. I guess these decks will just continue to be like the uh, question mark decks of tournament placings where it's like, okay, what was the top 16 from this major tournament over the weekend? You've got your 6 to 8 yellow hybrid, your 4 or 3 red hybrids, your amount of green hybrids, like probably maybe equivalent, like, and then 1 or 2 of these 3 OTK decks, They'll pop up, like Rookie Rush will probably still kind of pop up, and it'll just like make you like turn your head, be like, okay, what did this person do? Maybe this person had some like really good tech or a really good take on this, or maybe they just had some like easier matchups. It depends on the situation, but
because like not even mentioning Titamon OTK, where it's just like it has the Eismon package also. It has the Nidhoggmon, and it even has Demonic Disaster to allow you to swing multiple times. And again, the Eismon will put additional pressure on top of them also having access to Tamers. I don't think Titamon runs Tamers, but there's
no,
still a
not really.
possibility. Yeah, the deck space is just too much.
It's
Eismon's
too
eating too much of
slow.
that.
I mean, like just genuinely, I found it's too slow.
Well,
Like,
no, Icemon as a whole is just eating up too much of the deck space, so you can't necessarily run Icemon and hybrids at the same time because they just there's
yeah.
not enough room.
Well, I mean, even just running the Eismon package, that's what I've got for my list so far, and I was really excited for the title list. I guess I am always attracted by the like ideal situations of decks and like the idea that like Taita can really put in work um given the ability to restand, but like the amount of times where I've had to just like swing for 2 checks and that's it, just that's my whole turn. Like in a world where we do have decks like Jesmon doing way more than that, decks like hybrids that are just faster and more consistent and sometimes just checking for more security. Like it was a little awkward. Like it fell short a decent amount of times, and I'll have to like reattack and like reassess it. I guess the one strength that I um have for Titamon is that it can also, with the addition of a small 10 card side deck, be Lilith Loop, and that's its greatest asset.
Well, I mean, that's kind of like the whole point of like side decking in a sense where it's just like your side deck, if your package is small enough, you could actually just change decks and you could be like,
Mhm.
"Oh, you think I'm playing this? Well, JK, now I'm not." And that's like a pro and a con because now you have the availability to essentially swap a deck entirely, and shift your playstyle. But it also makes things way more complicated, like probably overly complicated, where it's just like, shoot, now I have to prepare against Lilith Loop and Titamon, um, all at the same time. And like,
Mhm.
it's not necessarily just Lilith Loop being stupid, it's more of just Zwart being stupid. And well, actually, Lilithmon is just
Well,
really stupid.
the like
Um,
I would say it's the ability for like Zwart to exist without passing turn is like the getting the on Digivolve and when attacking of Zwart in the same turn that makes Lilith Loop dangerous.
Yeah, and like if let's just say BT1 Omni had that same level of play, like that same availability, then that card would be absolutely disgusting in the right deck. Because I was looking at some like just fun possibilities of just trying to keep certain decks alive, and before they hit Mega Digimon Fusion, I was thinking of a Shoutmon deck where you could just stack a whole bunch of level 6 and then just swing out with the BT1 Omni just by going Mega Digimon Fusion.
Hmm.
Obviously, that's not going to work now, but we could do something somewhat similar with Machine Dramon, where you could be like Machine Dramon, get a stack, then we could Digivolve into Chaos, Digivolve into Omni. If Omni lives, he could swing 3 times because he's bouncing back 2 level 6s back to hand on top of any inheritables you give him that he could actually use. And then to end the turn, if you don't kill them with that, then you could just go X Antibody, and now those useless inheritables are now useful at shutting the opponent's aggression off.
Yeah. The I don't know, like so I know we've kind of gone over like the non-hybrid decks too, but I kind of want to close it with just like the idea that um the hybrids still win. Like unfortunately, we can talk about how cool all these decks are, um, but they definitely are the like under the floorboard kind of decks. They don't see the light of day. They don't get to enjoy the sun. They they get their food through whichever slits in the like floorboards that it falls. Um, and it's rough out there. For people not playing hybrid decks or that don't want to play hybrid decks. But um, if you're willing to play a hybrid deck, it's fun. It's interesting, and without Ice Wall and without Reinforce being as prevalent as they were, missing MDF. I guess missing MDF I don't feel because we never had MDF Susano, and it's not something that I had to deal with on a frequent basis. Um, like
That,
just
that we don't. That just looks
yeah,
inherently
the
stupid.
benefit that we don't have it now and how it just those decks that would abuse it just can't and don't exist in that fashion anymore. They've just changed their game plan in a way. Um, but the hybrid decks are cool, and having played them, most of my playtesting with green hybrids, only because it was the only deck that I didn't want to build a non-hybrid version of. Um, the idea of a a deck that like really works off your tamers, has a myriad of searching capabilities. Like these decks really search. Like it's a little crazy just your ordering of events, how you're what you're digivolving off of, um, what you're digivolving into, and then what are you pulling with your search effects when given the choice of multiple. Like I'm still a big proponent of like the more choices, the more skill, and I feel like I may just kind of need to stick to green to really nail it down because talking with a couple of like the more successful players around my locals, um, the idea that like uh, these situations coming up more frequently and just more frequently making the correct decisions given the available situation, it's almost like counting cards in a sense, where like you have to keep track of what is in your deck, what have you seen, what have you not seen, and what do you need. And as a result of that, uh, I can see some of these um, hybrid matchups being like really high skill plays, like some really like some Digimon matchups. I really am excited to watch play out.
Yeah, and it's not just exclusively to green hybrids because like blue, yellow, and red all have their own versions of searching to up their overall consistency, and I think like that just goes to show that like consistency is king, and the hybrid decks are just some of the most consistent decks out there. Like you don't see a rookie, but you see a hybrid. Cool. You're still playing cards. You're still advancing your game state. And that's like the magic of what Digimon's design has been trying to lean towards is just how to reduce the amount of dead hands while still having dead hands. So we see this in future formats as well. Just touching on those a little bit, like Digivolving on top of the same level. Again, it's turning what ordinarily would be useless into something useful. Um, and that's just a way to, again, reduce the amount of dead cards in your hand, is just having alternative ways to use that. And hybrids right now is the apex of how we could use these cards effectively and differently than any other deck in the entire game, or like deck style.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. I definitely wasn't trying to confine my statements to green hybrids specifically. It's just the one that like the angle that I'm going with, because I don't necessarily want to play yellow or red, and I don't necessarily think blue is good enough. Like I think blue is the worst hybrids I've played with so far. I have the least amount of
No, it's
experience with
purple.
purple,
It's
but
it's purple. Purple is easily the worst hybrid deck compared to the others. Like
I'm at
it's just not
least
doing enough.
I'm at least excited, or at least interested, I guess, to say, um, something that I saw brought up was the idea of like a purple hybrid deck with yellow rookies.
I
Um,
mean, like that's gonna have to be the way you play it because going back to like damage output, purple hybrids has almost no damage output. They have
you
nothing
can
to
just play
really
like Cherubi
push.
Pinata with Bushy Agumon and Pulsemon. That just sounds
I
fun to
mean,
me.
well, that's what you're gonna have to do because again, it just doesn't
Yeah.
have the damage to survive.
Mhm.
When like you look at the boss monsters for a lot of these other hybrid based decks, and it's just like outside of Susanomon, purple hybrids has literally nothing to actually deal damage. So they need to find some way to actually deal that extra damage. And the Cherubi Pinata style, where it's just like you sacrifice it, get a whole bunch of good on play and rush effects from your level threes,
Mhm.
is just the only thing they could really do. And the hybrids just facilitates Cherubimon because, well, it just works that way.
Yeah. Um. But yeah, like just the idea that these uh these matchups will have a lot of like choices to be made. Um. A lot of like lines of play that um just like basically in a world where everyone has to play by the same like dumb rules in a sense. Like so we've complained about like the hybrid supremacy in the form of its uninteractivity and how like safe tamers are. So like choosing not to digivolve now because I cannot protect it or I can't utilize the effects of turning it into a Digimon as much because while I get the benefits of it, I get the Digivolve, I get to move up the line, I get to search whatever your specific hybrid deck's trying to do. You've now created a target, at least something that can die. Whereas previously it was pretty much unstoppable.
Right, which is why like you want to get the most out of your cards, and a lot of the well top performing hybrid decks are going to be able to get the most out of their cards. You look at green as just like an example. Like they could go up their line insanely efficiently, and then they just punch the opponent's Digimon that's sitting on the field, and now you just lost two, potentially three security for literally nothing out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And all of the other hybrid decks have something very similar, where it's just like yellow hybrids. Sure, it's going to be the one where it's Digimon's going to sit out the longest, but it's going to be the Mega Digimon that's going to keep them in the game the longest as well.
Mhm.
So it's like, oh, I'm going to go up the line, create a more powerful security that turn, um, recover, and then sit on a Digimon that's going to either A, recover, or B, recover. Or in the case of Shine, C, remove the opponent's Digimon or fields depending on the threats that they're trying to present them with.
Yeah.
Red hybrids, again, just come out of nowhere, start punching the opponent's security relatively hard, and the opponent can't really do anything about it because it's red and they have the delicate plan effect. Blue hybrids, again, same type of thing, come out swinging and bouncing the opponent's Digimon back to their hand while they're refilling their hand for hybrids to then consistently be able to play more hybrids.
Hmm. I found the blue hybrid to be lackluster only because like the strict requirement of digivolving into Magna, of having all those hybrids in your hand, like it 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 forces less ideal turns because yeah, like
Oh, you
ideal.
you don't care about that. Like Koji isn't super great because of that. What you're mostly doing is using the Tommy line to keep the opponent's Digimon stun locked, and then you just swing out with Magno,
What
just
Digimon?
actually digivolving into them.
What Digimon?
Well, for more traditional style of decks and Digimon that are
Exactly.
actually sticking
You're
on the field.
I guess like I'll say
Well, no,
I
so
blue's the
like
best
they're
at
still gonna
beating
have
down the normal decks.
yeah, but like they're still going to have something on the field. Like if they're just sitting there playing their tamers, you're also sitting there playing your tamers, setting it up.
Hmm.
So like you're still playing essentially this game of chicken on who raises first loses, and blue does that better than the other decks. The other decks, yes, are more proactive, but blue also can still be just as proactive with a reactive element, where the
I
other decks don't really have
I
that.
mean, we could get into the specifics probably in another episode, but I just think that like the in the like on an decision by decision, like turn by turn basis, Blue's plays are less ideal because like blue and red being the only two that are running hybrid rookies, the only ones that have access to hybrid rookies. Um so I mean, I guess just like Pokemon existing too, but like um I'm trying to think through different plays and like the idea that like the other hybrids, all of the hybrids share a quality in that they can take advantage of opponents' resources and use it against them. And blue is almost like trying to do the LordKnightmon thing where they have to like try and punish their opponent for going first, but the decks that are ahead of blue hybrid are ahead of them, in my opinion, because they don't care. They do what they do, and it's finite, and like no amount of punishment makes up for the loss they have just received. You know?
Well, blue hybrids also has the advantage of having a completely different two completely different sub-hybrid packages.
Yeah.
So, like blue hybrids as a general term is kind of not doing the color justice because they still have the promo Lobo and the ancient, and that puts an insane amount of aggression and pressure onto the
Hmm.
opponent just to actually make those lines of play more consistent because they could still use their raising area to set up the Lobo play and then still have the availability to actually use their hybrids to get some extra swings in. So like it's could still be very aggressive. On top of the fact that like it also has the Tommy line and it has the Koji line, and each one is good at different things depending on what you're trying to look for and what you're trying to gain out of your cards.
So, um, I feel like with blue and red, it's easy to mention how like they get like not exactly mirrored, like color shifted mirrored mechanics, and in the sense of the ancient package with regard to the hybrids, the blue one is worse, almost like just comparatively. So Agunimon, when attacking, can Evo. So you can Digivolve into Aguni and raising. Lobo, when Digivolving. So you have to raise the level 3 to even use this effect. Like check like one win for red. And then actually looking at the level 6s, um Ancient Greymon being able to gain security pluses for each um hybrid, like because especially when you're evoing ancient over the tamer, that's blowing your stack out, and it plays itself. So even if like the chip play I've mentioned previously, where you just literally 3/4 pass, raise a Goonie to evo into ancient, plays um another level 4, replacing itself in a sense, or in a way, not exactly, but um with ancient Garuru, like that same line of play is just not possible because you cannot digivolve into Lobo and raising, and you also cannot like the benefit of unsuspending up to two Digimon with Garurumon or hybrids. doesn't matter if you just raise a Lobomon or raise a hybrid Evo into Lobo and then immediately Evo into Ancient because it's the only thing on the field.
Well, I mean, it's still two checks regardless. Like, it's still playing into that chip style. It's just a little bit different. And obviously, yes, the more Digimon you have on the field, the stronger that ability becomes. So, like, yeah, it does require a little bit more setup, but it's still just as good and viable as an early game aggression tool than Red's. Like, Red, if anything, wants to use Takuya way more than Blue wants to use Koji because Takuya is actually stupid because it's pulling the stuff out of the trash. But
Yeah.
that's just because interacting with the trash for free value is just already inherently dumb. We've seen this before in multiple different card games. Just anything that's doing trash-based interactions is already broken because that's a zone you are not touching. There's a way to mitigate the hand, and even though Digimon has lots of card draw, it doesn't really have a whole lot of discard. So like it does have that parity, but those are still cards you're actually trying to use rather than cards that are not being used. Which yes, it does make Koichi worse, but Blue thankfully has lots of different card draw to be able to have the ability to have a wide hand to use his effect. And then we see this with like the Blue Hybrid package from BT7, where it's adding hybrids back into your hand, so that way you could easily set up Koji that way too.
Yeah.
So like they are still doing very similar things but different. In yes, I do think Red is still going to be strong, like stronger than Blue,
Hmm.
but Blue is still one that's going to be a top contender just because it still has almost the same exact type of tools that Red does. I actually think if anything, Blue will take a hit because of the popularity of Green.
Yeah, that's what I guess. So that's more in line with what I'm saying, I guess, is that like, so Blue is just like in like the one-to-one comparison, like per piece, like I guess the ancient package specifically worse. Um, and in the hybrid package worse. Um, but and then having to like it also losing like the rock paper scissors, so to speak, of like the red, blue, green. I guess yellow also. I don't really know where yellow fits in exactly, but like um
Yellow is just the control.
so but the idea of like being weak to green and slower than red, which
Well,
so like
it's not really
weak to
slower
red.
than Red. It's just as fast as Red,
Nothing's as
because
fast as red. I tell you that like of all the hybrids, nothing's faster than red.
I'm if Takuya is set up, yeah, nothing is faster than Red. If Takuya is not set up, then Blue is faster than Red.
It sets itself up. That's what I mean. Like the idea of that like whole Aguni play, just throwing all of that in the trash sets up Takuya faster.
Yeah, but like again, the parity difference is like Blue wants to draw, so every time you're basically swinging, you're drawing. So it's still that same level of parity, just again done differently. But like the fact that Blue also has other tools and can hit just as hard, like Red needs to go into its stuff to be able to hit relatively hard. Blue kind of just doesn't.
I will give it that because in so I haven't really played against a deck that's utilized the like BT4 ancient package with like in a blue hybrid deck, but the idea of the blue hybrids like the games I lost weren't necessarily because of Magna Garurumon. Like they basically won without it most times. Or if they did, it was extra. It was a win more card.
Right, that's kind of where I'm getting at, where it's just like it's almost taking on a Rookie Rush esque or Rookie Rush esque style approach with just bomb win cons, like
Hmm.
because of the multi swing. But like going back to the rock paper scissors before we shift back to the not hybrid stuff, um, like if anything, the rise in popularity of green hybrids is going to put a huge deterrent on blue hybrids because people are going to want to still multi-swing, and Ancient Troymon doesn't allow that to happen.
Hmm. I was I guess
It-
also with like the like anti-chip mentality, like going back to the like almost like core tenet of how to beat hybrids is you don't want to chip them necessarily because you give like I've won games where you like they raise or they like digivolve a level 3 in raising, play a searcher, and then swing with the searcher on the following turn, flipping a tamer, be like, cool, I win now. I mean, not exclusively that turn, but like enough momentum. You've given me a 4-cost tamer for free. That did something. Like, you've given me 4 memory, essentially, and given me a card that I now will Evo off of and do something to you with. And specifically with the green, because it's the one I have the most experience with, you've given me a level 3 to Ancient Beetle with, so I can swing through you to trash security with, because you have these bodies on board that are additional targets. But I was kind of over the non-hybrid stuff, I guess. We've kind of talked about like um, what they do, why we think they're good. I guess like, do you have anything else you want to add to that? Um,
I mean, like, there's still lots of viability in them. It's just they're put in a situation where they're going to have to adapt or die, and I think that's going to be like the true testament on the more dedicated players with those decks, because like they could still adopt the hybrid package and not lose themselves to hybrids. Because look at like Hexablaumon as an example. It's just like, cool, you are moving out your tamers. If you're unable to kill me, I'm just going to start popping your inheritable sources, and then I'm just going to do Hexablau things to
mhm.
basically lock you out of the game. Like, they're still viable, and we're not saying like all hybrid decks are tier 1 or tier 0 in their own sense, because you have to play hybrids to beat hybrids. That's not necessarily true. Um, there's still just a lot of exploration that we have to do in our English format, just because we are playing under different rules than what Japan was. And Japan, as we saw, had different rules that affected their meta as well. So like green really didn't, as an example, green hybrids didn't really do anything in Japan. There was very few green hybrid lists. But I think green hybrids is going to do very well in English format just because of the differences.
Mhm.
And that could be the same with non-hybrid based decks too, where it's like a truly disgusting OTK deck could come out of the woodworks and do very, very well. Um, like maybe green OTK makes a comeback in some way, shape, or form. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just
Jamming
because I
being more
think the
relevant than ever.
yeah, like I think just there is a lot to explore. Um, Not only just with hybrids and all of the packages and some packages, but with just what we have been playing with already and trying to adopt it to be able to handle the influx of hybrids.
Yeah. I definitely don't think that the hybrid decks are tier 0. I don't think there are any tier 0 decks at the moment.
No, I
Still
don't
haven't
think
had
so
one.
either.
Um, Again, by the definition that a tier 0 deck, by most metrics, is just a deck that only loses to itself. Um, or at least
Even a deck
most
with a
often. Most
60%,
often, yeah.
yeah, even like going off of other definitions, like winning 60% or 65% of the time, we still haven't even had that. Like,
Yeah. We've
that's
had
the
decks that
astonishing
were
part.
like, I mean, LordKnightmon was, I think, at one point like 40% of the meta, but like
It
still
was
less than half.
Yeah, it was 40% of the meta share with a win rate of around 55%. Gabu Bond was about 20 to 25% of the meta share, and it had around a 58% win rate.
Yeah, at a higher percentage win rate. Um, Mostly because it lost against itself a lot. So, um, you maintain a high win rate that way. It saw a lot more play, um, especially in the X1. But so
Yeah, and I even think the bonds are still good just because the bonds can like
yeah.
still deal lots of damage. Like that's kind of just the name of the game, is like how much damage can you deal or how much damage can you mitigate.
hmm I think like we've really touched on a lot of points. Like there are like core tenets that like how to play against a hybrid deck and why the hybrid decks are good. I think, and like pretty much every deck like hits one of them or multiple of them. The thing that I guess I really want to like impress upon anyone still listening, just the idea that while I would say that like you don't have to be a hybrid deck to beat a hybrid deck, you're still gonna see the like everything I say comes from like I guess just like a statistical point of view, or like the like these aren't my opinions necessarily. I guess they are my exclusively my opinions, but like right now. But the idea that like it's not because I want green hybrid to be good is why I think it will be good. Like it's because I think it will be good. You know? Like I don't necessarily want yellow hybrid to be good. I just think it will be good. And when I say something is bad, it's not necessarily because you can't play it or you shouldn't play it. It's just because on paper, like these are the like the uphill climb you have to achieve to like to get success, I guess. The idea that like if you want to play an OTK deck, if you want to play X Antibody, if you want to play LordKnightmon, if you want to play it's not an OTK deck, it's like a stack deck, a traditional stack deck, um, then you just need to understand that these are the things you have to play around, and that you're probably not going to see a lot of people playing your deck. You're not going to hear about it, and you may not do well. And when the tournament reports come out, we'll see a narrowing of the meta, as we always do. People start to abandon whatever build that they thought was good once they will latch onto something they know is good.
Right. And then, as we mentioned before multiple times on this podcast, it would be up to you, the individual, to tech your own deck, um, to be able to handle what you think the tournament environment is going to be, because those tech cards are still going to matter. Even sideboard tech and etc. Like your tech is what's going to define how well, or it's going to lead to a huge part of how well you are going to do at those events. And like you can't just simply net deck and take a deck and say, okay, slap on the table, this is good. No, Digimon's not a game where you could do that. You have to make yourself prepared for various different situations, and that's going to be the hardest thing for a lot of people to understand. And I've seen this already just reading Facebook posts and forum posts where it's just like, I'm having a hard time beating this deck, how do I do it? It's like
Mm-hmm.
part of that is your skill. You're just unfamiliar with how to actually tech your deck and build your deck on top of playing it against the decks you're going to be struggling against. And traditional stack decks are going to have a harder time doing that just because of the meta shift.
Yeah, like we just the different variations of decks, the hybrid decks or the stack decks, are playing by almost different rules, and like what you would consider to be a good hand or good cards that you've seen or that you're happy with, um, are just they're harder or less efficient or less they gain you less than some of these hybrid decks. And though that doesn't mean you can't beat them, it just means that the idea that you need to be more familiar with what to do in the situations, when to push aggression, when not to, when to hold back, when to play out, when to try and maybe play for your outs in like especially in these stack decks where um, I um, just like really hammering out playtesting, just kind of putting games on the board, like big data kind of in a big data kind of way. Um, the amount of times I've evoed off a level 4, like evoed off a Grumblemon in X Antibody and immediately drawing the level 4 that because I only run 3 Grumblemon. I don't want to use them in the stack because it doesn't count for the X Antibody inheritable, it doesn't give me anything, and um, that's just one less piece that I have to win potentially in a future turn. So, um, having that matchup knowledge, especially like I guess my biggest recommendation would be play against your least favorite matchup. Like be the best at your worst matchup. I know um in the LordKnightmon meta, I played LordKnightmon. I did uh like I guess the best I've done in any format thus far in the LordKnightmon meta, mostly because I only played against LordKnightmon. Honestly, like in playtesting or um in tournaments, I mostly played the mirror, and I felt like I was pretty good at it. I teched my deck to beat LordKnightmon, and I played my deck to beat LordKnightmon.
I mean, granted, it's a little bit harder with the rock paper scissors that hybrids has, because like just because you tech your deck against one hybrid deck and you run against another one because they have equal prevalence, that's going to be a little bit harder. But like that's up to you, the player, to now know
Hmm.
your skills against those matchups.
Yeah, like you could, I mean, you could really like there only being a handful of like tier one slash high priority decks. Like you could really sit down and say, I'm going to learn my matchups in A, B, and C. And maybe if A is your worst matchup, you tech and practice for A. If B is your second worst matchup, you tech less for or practice more. And C, it being like the rogue, like I can't tech for, I don't have the space, I just have to practice it. You know, just really nail down the ins, the outs of those matchups, and being familiar and being fluid with lines of play. Um, Digimon, while being like your random a deck a card game, can be a lot more like chess, I guess, than I've felt sometimes. Like the more I've played matchups, the more times I've been familiar with situations and just understanding like okay, I can either like I mean just like simple stuff too, like do I play the tamer on this turn so that I have the guaranteed 3 memory next turn to digivolve twice? For so I like on do I go 5 passing turn? Do I play the tamer so that I can go 5/6? Do I do some other combination of plays? Like am I allowing for potentially some removal to be played here? What happens if I like my opponent trips the tamer in security? What if they trip an option in security, removing like just those kinds of situations like to really familiarize yourself with can make the difference in this kind of meta, especially with it, like for someone who is wanting to pilot the hybrid deck. Like I've never felt so unfamiliar with cards that I knew what they did until I sat down and played with them in my hands.
Yeah. But I think that's all the time we have this week. Definitely lots of really, really good points were made, and I think this discussion went pretty in some interesting directions. Um, but like the big takeaway is just because you're a traditional stack style of deck doesn't mean you're a dead deck. Doesn't mean the deck is bad. It just means you have to learn again how to replay the game. Just like we had to relearn how to play the game in BT4 and prepare for raising meta. This is just another meta shift that you have to adapt to.
Yeah. With that, I believe we'll be closing it out. See you next week. Goodbye.
Bye.